Unknown. Juan Carrillo. Quick side note. If you are beginning my book, Audios for the first time on a random chapter location, please you'd want to hear the introductory chapter, because it will orient you to the spiritual origins of this book. My books are on paperback and ebook. The Phases of Revelation is available on paperback with an index for your personal study and interests. The same goes my first book, As I Passed Him. And now, greetings everyone. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Revelations Unearthed. Thank you for your attention and you're listening to my series of videos narrating my book, The Phases of Revelation. Please hit the like and subscribe button below. Your comments and questions are welcome and appreciated. And yes, please share my videos with anyone and everyone. If I may suggest that if you have any significant correlative current events per any of my interpretations, please make a note in the comments. Thank you so much and enjoy. And here now begins the next chapter. The All Encompassing Nature. I would like to convey an important concept that is necessary to understand before proceeding further into this book. This chapter is an introductory style chapter that will help to make us receptive to the depiction of collective, global generalities connected to the modern-day nature of our times. Our modern times are narrowing down to a climax that is tied into the spiritual condition of mankind. His trials and deeds are drawing to an end to the old worldly ways of human nature. Our only task is that we should empty our spiritual house of all the baggage of worldly ways and intoxications, idols and external influences in order to make you aware and hopefully to prepare you for a journey. The journey is not an immediate voluntary one, but one born of political, spiritual, and economic circumstances that will force us into responding in one of two ways. My book is not exactly aimed at preparing us, but rather to warn us, to help you make an informed decision based on sharing my thoughts and continued interpretations of a means through which we can best sense and perceive the present-day signs of a world in decline. So here's the big question. Is creation winding down before our very eyes? I am not saying it's the end and that it's all about a gloom and doom scenario, and that's it. But I want to add that hereafter. It is winding back up into a new heaven and a new earth. We have seen remarkable weather events in the news and heard about other such signs through public medias that are giving some indication and basis to believe in this highly possible perspective. And so, we're only in the introduction, so please stay with me and keep an open and critical mind. The following theory I also make mention in another chapter, but I would like to mention it here as well, because it suitably fits into the general nature of this chapter, and the question, is creation winding down? I call it escalating collective energy. These are events or a series of events that are heightened to a degree beyond the norm, and have qualities of regional to global impact, rarity or oddity, collective escalation or increase. These events are altogether adding up to divine outcomes and a purpose outlined in the apocalypse. These event oddities can consist of environmental patterns, negative and positive spiritual events, human nature and behavioral movements from individual to political to financial, along with unusual weather, biological, zoological, geological, astronomical, environmental, climactic, etc. These events must have qualities of ever-increasing frequency and energies occurring in concentrations that amount to signs of our times. This book will definitely help guide your decisions and perceptions, which I believe is subconsciously dormant in the deep recesses of faith and instinct. Unfortunately, societal norms, economic and political systems, power and ideologies is the predominant worldly idol, intoxicating and overwhelmingly holding faith in a modern-day stranglehold. The latter is only part of this escalating formula. We must awaken our inner spiritual being and connect to the Holy Spirit in whatever degree of distance it may reside on a person-by-person basis. Unfortunately, tribulation is the primary vehicle for this awakening. I hate to do a sudden 360-degree turn on you from the latter part of my introduction, but why and how have I arrived at this? Well, it's not based on extensive research, but what I believe is divine insight to write down, not just my experience, but further tell and write about it per my modern day growing up in the current climactic global political environment, and how the insight is brought to this book's driving characteristic in nature, My perspective is founded upon my spiritual experience. This all began in October of 2008 when a peak experience led to an unknown man calling me by name. He knew me, but I did not know him. Or, not quite yet, that is. I immediately felt and knew it was a spiritual experience involving an unknown man calling me by name. Of course, there were many questions, primarily, who was this man, and why was he calling my name? The latter experience unfolds and grows into a later recognition of this man, by way of the Holy Spirit, as, Peter, it is you, Peter, and that he will be Pope one day. For now, I just mean to brief the reader because I have written about this experience, along with my interpretations of these revelations, in my first book entitled As I Passed Him, A Prophecy Within Our Times. Of course, almost any spiritual experience relies on the credibility and reliability of the testimony given and how well it has been pieced together to conclude, as I have interpreted it in my previous book. My previous book tells about what happened in order to place the reader in my spiritual situation and lifestyle, and to guide you to the main points of emphasis. My purpose here is that you should confide, as I do, in the spiritual energy concentrated in my experience. This is where I describe having spiritually recognized Cardinal Oscar Rodriguez as, Peter, it is you, Peter, followed by a foreign thought where I felt a strong impulse to write down that he will be Pope one day. The key word is that he will be Pope. Do I believe that he will be Pope one day? The answer is yes. And being that he is an elderly man in the present tense, I believe he will be Pope one day, or within a time frame that is very near. The latter I have interpreted as meaning that St. Malachi's last Pope prophecy of Petrus Romanus is soon to be fulfilled. The latter grows onto a grander scale because the time of the last Pope will be a time of tribulation per St. Malachi. This means that the holy offering and creation are transitioning into a phase of renewal and judgment. Dramatic, yes, but this is how I interpret it to unfold. We are talking about the Holy Spirit as the source of a spiritual experience that is not just personal to me, but what I consider to be collective in nature. I have gotten past the doubt, and have come to refer to my experience as concrete fact. It happened to me, and so it is fact to me. But to my readers, I hope that you faithfully read on and let this book tell you about it as best as I can. We are seeing global political events, wars, and further rumors of more war, significant weather and climate patterns, etc., conversions, networks putting increased stress on faith, while many falling out of faith, global population explosion, some negatives and positives to globalism and its electronic interconnecting social medias, solidarity even amidst this entanglement of ultra-stressing negatives and positives, etc. To me, all are indicating that this is a collective chain of events, as Christ said, will be taking place prior to his return. Given my experience occurred in 2008, and self-published my book in 2013, and now being 2025, I question if it did mean that a once cardinal back then is still able to become a pope as a non-cardinal, but, as back then to now, I need not doubt and must move on with this current conclusion and keep an open mind. Please notice that the cardinal's name is Oscar, and not Peter. Given that the name Peter was revealed to me by the Holy Spirit, a credible source of all wisdom and insight, I firmly feel confident in laying out my interpretations this way. I believe this cardinal will take the papal name of Peter. Please note that no pope, since the first pope appointed by Christ himself, has ever called himself Peter. Out of respect for Christ's first and founding and divine appointee of Peter I, past popes have chosen not to voluntarily take this name. According to St. Malachi's prophecy, the Holy Spirit appears to have reserved this papal name for the last pope, and that it should coincide with a period of tribulation. But who is the last pope? If you take a close look at my experience, you will know that my interpretations and involuntary and spiritual recognition, by way of the Holy Spirit, is precisely giving us information of a papal event that is soon to take place. I am not saying that Cardinal Rodriguez will name himself after Peter by his own preference, but rather that he or the conclave of cardinals will be inspired to give him the papal name of Peter the Single, or I don't know exactly how this may unfold, but this is the way I experienced it. How can the credible and reputable cardinal himself, along with the Catholic Church and its College of Cardinals, actually take part in giving this name to any new pope without some sort of divine intervention, inspired only by yours truly, the Holy Spirit? Has the Holy Spirit, subconscious to other popes knowing, intentionally reserved this name for the last pope. Is this Peter the Roman? Yes, it is. The same spiritual pool I connected to in my experience, along with Sister Lucia's third message and others, is now climaxing into fulfillment. I would like to note that I engaged in writing this book with some sense of urgency that was felt and timed by some spiritual manner that coincides with the recent announcement that Pope Benedict has resigned from being pope. No pope has ever resigned, and it is rare that they do, as this has not happened in over 600 years. This is happening in the present tense of me finishing up this book. Thoughts are going through my mind, as I am currently aware that the conclave is going to elect a new pope soon. The reality of the Spirit is lingering over this. I am not in anticipation, but I only know that only time will tell the true meaning of this experience. A papal historian asked me via an email why I was so quiet and not out engaging in blogs or some form of excitement and dialogue. I told him that I have been busy writing this book, of which has had the best of my attention and focus. In March 13th, 2013, when I was wrapping up my book, I was in anticipation and wondering if this is when the conclave will be electing a pope that might call himself Peter. It wasn't time for Pope Peter II, but instead the new pope was Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio from Argentina, of whom had given himself the papal name of Francis I. Uniquely, he is the first Latin American pope, the first pope to ever name himself after St. Francis of Assisi, and the first Jesuit pope. His humble character, along with a mentioned sense of humor, has been of special mention by the media. In one media moment over the radio, it was said that upon being elected as our next pope, he had said, "May God bless me for what you have done." This comment was taken as one among many traits of humility that is characteristic of his personality, along with his chosen name of St. Francis. Personally, I rejoice at this because, even more so now, the Church makes a statement of persistence and adherence to tradition. I believe this is perfectly nestled in with a welcoming character of love, charity, patience, forgiveness, and a non-judgmental fashion. The conclave has elected a pope most suited in character to address the demands and influences that our world is attempting to impose upon a church that must stand firm, now more than ever, against evil and its attempted efforts to infiltrate the one and only Church of Christ. I have heard the ridiculousness of fundamentalism that even resorts to intentional deceptions and accusations of schizoid proportions, evident by an imbalanced nature and defiance that is advocating extreme beliefs. For example, the claim that the Jesuit order has some kind of Masonic connection. Where they gather such nonsense is beyond me. Such extreme belief systems push the envelope to such limits that it goes on to prove an oppressive influence of a negative nature that goes to such extremes to discredit innocence at any cost. Personally, I applaud and rejoice at Pope Francis' humble and traditional characteristics as they have come through the media. This, to me, maintains the Book of Revelation phase of the iron rod, and that Pope Francis is the iron rod stance before Peter II, who will be pope during a time of a terrible tribulation. I will be giving further interpretations of the meaning of the iron rod phase in a later chapter. Briefly, this is a phase in Revelation where the Church must defend itself, now more than ever, against very intense spiritual forces that are interpreted by me in this book as a constellation of a huge red dragon. We see the monster versus a docile church maintaining gentleness and love in light of this global authoritarian dragon. Given the globalism and the intense magnitude of these images and revelations and their connection to our times, the Holy Spirit will begin to depict a firm stance of persistent innocence. This is exemplary of when our courageous and heroic Christ was struck on one cheek. He simply turned and gave them the other cheek, so that they may merely persist in their spiritual path of self-destruction, while his flock remains saved, not in a physical sense, but in a spiritual sense. The humble stance of this precious lamb of a pope is an outpouring of immense climaxing energy reaching to the heights of the iron rod phase. This is a firm stand that gives the world one cheek and then the other. Given that Pope Benedict, for the first time in the history of popes, has recently resigned due to a demanding and wicked world pressing upon his personal peace and health. This, in turn, is exemplary of the struggles of the modern church amidst a harsh world of Satan and his proposed delusions. This marks the beginnings of the pressures of the world of Satan, a phase that is attacking the innocent lamb. It wants to totally eat the child, or the Church. The traits of St. Francis of Assisi and traditional is now more than ever a necessary character of ruling in times of intense spiritual influences and forces of a now interconnected global society. The worldly and politically fit administrator traits that partly characterize popes of the past are over. The innocence of Christ is the iron rod. This is a hammer far more powerful than traditional administrator styles and traits. This power of innocence leads to a determined fate presently fulfilling itself. It gives rise to a foundation of rock, de piedra, Petrus Romanus, a readying for Peter II. As for my comment on why Peter II was not elected by the Spirit at the conclave electing Pope Francis, this is because it is not yet time for this phase. Peter's phase is during a time of great tribulation and persecution. This phase is soon to come. Remember, my book was published in 2013, and now being 2025. I have felt God to be closely by, once while writing a section in this book, and once when I was tired and nodding off and insistent on continuing to write this book. I felt a voice say, "I am with you, I am with you." During this time, I was typing while my eyes were feeling sleepy and even feeling doubtful, and had thoughts of whether or not God is okay with this. I guess my God decided to, right then and there, picking a perfect time in my patience and endurance, he decided to reinforce me. This is his way, to give you a hint of his presence from time to time, in order to encourage and support us in whatever we may be pursuing in his name. And when in doubt, always ask him, and he will give you a sign. I thanked him for this because it simply had the cause of persistence, which, knowing myself, I would have gotten right back into it anyway. As many timelines that are out there on the internet these days, everyone predicting this and that about tribulations and themes of this sort, I have not seen one that uses a profound spiritual experience, like my timeline does, as the basis for its claims. My timeline is founded by my profound encounter with the Cardinal, the revelation of, "Peter, it is you, Peter," my 13 years remaining dream, etc., and thereafter, building it from the spiritual logic of events that are currently unfolding. The latter, profound spiritual experience that began in 2008 and my best effort in logically placing events is also the basis of my full confidence in interpreting the vision of events depicted by St. John in the book of Revelation. I would like to momentarily stop your frame of mind and make note that St. John's doomsday and second coming depiction was not the product of his own thoughts and possibilities, but was directly written based on what he witnessed and was told to write down by way of the Holy Spirit. The same and only Holy Spirit that reveals in profound and credible fashion the spiritual recognition of the Cardinal as, "Peter, it is you, Peter." The latter cannot be denied or refuted, that is from my standpoint, and I beg that you have faith and confidence in this, or at least give it some understanding and correlation of your own, so that you may begin to see it as I do. My logic of having placed St. Malachi's prophecy concerning the last pope of Petrus Romanus, or Peter the Roman, is the fact that he was made a saint. This means his works had a connection to the Holy Spirit. I confide that the source of his information is, again, directly from the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is timeless and purely an honest source that must never be denied, never, but to always give its information, even though the information is spread throughout centuries, the credibility and divinity it requires. Its information is as reliable and exceptionally above any man-made source of information. It is the source of all wisdom and intelligence to which mankind is indebted. Without the Holy Spirit, mankind becomes disconnected from God, and thereby his thoughts and doings are all dead works. Having said this, and having applied it to my experience, I hereby confidently correlate it to St. Malachi's order of the popes and the final one, being Peter. I make connections to an existing top candidate for pope as being revealed to me as Peter, and onward to St. John's book of Revelation in the manner of rationale described above. My connections are not a product of arrogance or audacity or whatever you may conceive of in this nature. It is my best effort in sharing with you my spiritual experience and connections, and the undeniable occurrence of very credible global events that are unfolding and occurring as we speak. Do not return onto your old home in a spiritual sense, but rather remain on the rooftop, symbolizing the church, from whence the cock crows to proclaim their fate from here forth until they come before Christ for judgment. Do not go under or back to retrieve any items lest you get snared by the evildoers and compromise your soul in the process. Let go and let God. I say again and again, for the journey is to ready the soul. We must put on hold whether or not we are consciously or unconsciously aware that the world, as we know it, is transforming and winding down. I prefer to say winding down instead of saying that the world is ending. To the heathen, the world is ending along with the Satan who rules over them. To the sheep, it is not ending unless you fail to hear the calling and make the wrong choices. If we fail to heed the warnings and instructions of the two witnesses, then and only then is the world ending. Careers and worldly business and purpose are ending in the near future. It is but a mere hour away. An hour for God is the final period within which all must endure and suffer in order to make it to heaven and join the great crowd that has made it through the tribulation and persecution period. The great divine filter is one of endurance, suffering, patience, persecution, death, faith, etc., all of which measures up to a final test in order to make it. Notice death, for all creation must come to a near death. Creation is ongoing this right now, and is destined to increase and profoundly define this necessary and divine decline. In light of my spiritual experience and my 13 years remaining dream, I personally feel that I, in the name of Christ and not vanity, am able to see some truths, significances, and correlations present throughout the book of Revelation. As a result of my spiritual experience talked about in my first book, I feel that all of us share in the spirit it was written in. Please do not presume me to be saying that I see eye to eye with the author of this extraordinary prophetic work. St. John had a very unique place amongst men as a disciple of Christ, and shared in a very real first-hand wisdom and insight that was later led by the Holy Spirit. I would like to leave this text as a starting point from which we can interpret this very real and significant depiction of mankind's end times. In no way is this to be written off to myth and mere symbols, but rather a significant imprint of a person selected by divine inspiration to depict what is going to happen. St. John was led by the Holy Spirit, which is more real than real. His writings were not the ravings of a madman, but rather a man writing down what God had instructed him to write. The visions were symbolic and foreign, but yet he wrote them down as seen. Yes, John knew it by heart and soul upon joining with the Holy Spirit the nature of these visions. The information was downloaded, sort of speak, into his mind and heart, and so it becomes an innate wisdom characteristic of him to write about. The physical has deceived us long enough. It must stop. It is enough. Have faith and do not doubt God. These times are about stopping, ending, decisiveness, finality, urgency, emergency, proclamation, victory in heaven, and foremost, rejoice. All of these terms go with the many end-time language themes and decisively masculine symbols like, she gave birth to a son who will rule over all nations with an iron rod. The term all nations is taking place within Revelation section 12 and therefore relates to the meaning intended for this section. This describes a particular necessary element and significant presence within this section and the time it is referring to. The latter themes are the particular types of general phrases and passages which must be kept in the back of the mind in order for these symbolic meanings to begin to make sense. They interconnect understanding and meaning on a per-section basis. These passages are concentrated energies and human spiritual concentrations on a collective scale. They are like the product of the snowball effect that has been accumulating throughout the passage of time. It is steadily present now, as it has been in times past, but now it has come to a decisive end, an end to these cycles of evil intrusions in the form of social anarchy, injustice, chaos, individual trials, and temptations, and now the grand finale on a global scale never before seen until now. They are outcomes from individual to communal that are now taunted and prompted into desperate measures on a scale taking on spiritual representations, like the beast, the huge red dragon, or the great harlot. The latter energy concentrations, when on a collective scale, will take desperate manifestations and actions measuring up to the heightened scales described in the book of Revelation. These energies take on collective and significant forms, such as the dragon, of which, in turn, is born of mankind's spiritual weaknesses and vulnerabilities to sin. Sin is a necessary element to fight off on an individual scale because it ultimately accumulates to a global, collective scale or a communal norm represented as a dragon. We cannot see what constitutes mass or matter when it comes to spiritual forms, except to see that negative accumulations, when represented in the hearts of many, takes on such symbolic and monstrous forms. And rightly so, they depict the true reality, the true nature of the beast that man is capable of becoming without Christ in the center of his world. I am not saying that images are insignificant, but rather, I mean to say that these images are significant building blocks of creation and mankind simply because we are all made in the image of God. So, the image represents significant mass, which in turn somehow transforms or manifests into what we understand more readily. From seeing as a lower form of believing, we must see and rationalize the concrete perspective as matter. Man is a physical representation made in the image of God, and so we are represented as such by creation. In our present times, we are reducing ourselves to lesser beings, or images that manifest as beasts and ungodly creatures. If we embrace the image of the beast and denounce God's image within us, then we fall into the abyss with a rightfully earned image intact. Come out of her, Babylon, my people, is an example of the scenario on top of scenario that will accumulate or measure up to the collectivism of this phrase. Revelation is entirely a product of this level of collectivism, and I do mean all of it. The end days in creation and any other climaxing stage of human history will summon huge deities that have been accumulating for this climaxing period of tribulation and the 7 seals. Hope you enjoyed the chapter. Please hit the like and subscribe button below. Your comments and questions are welcome and appreciated. Please share the video or my channel link with anyone and everyone. And thank you for listening, and God bless.